Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 79. I wonder if you can hear the rain outside my window right now. Brisbane is experiencing a major flood event. My garden is quite literally a river, and the road that connects the house with the village is also a river. It's a lot. Today I've been feeling quite overwhelmed actually. I feel like so many things in our world are out of control and there isn't much that I can do to help. So I just keep doing what I do, which is having conversations and bringing them to you through this podcast. Today's conversation is with nature illustrator Rosalie Haizlett. Rosalie is so good at showing people the tiny details in nature, and through her work she aims to help people connect with and protect the natural world. In our conversation we speak about Rosalie's career, her art practice, her beautiful new book, Watercolor in Nature, and what she's planning for her next big project. Let's listen. Rosalie, thank you so much for joining me. I'm very, very much looking forward to chatting with you today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I love your show.
That is so sweet, and I love your work, and I'm really excited to dig into it. But the first thing I always love to do is to start chatting about my guests' personal history and especially personal connection with nature from early years. And I know you grew up on a farm, and I'd love to hear about that, about your connection with nature in those early years.
Yeah. So I grew up on a farm in West Virginia, and it's been in our family for a while, and it's been strip mined and logged and all of those lovely things over the years. So it's definitely not pristine at all. But growing up, I always thought it was like the pinnacle of pure natural beauty. And that's something I've kind of grappled with getting older, because I've realized like there are a lot of components of the farm that are not ideal. Like the creek is extremely polluted, and there are like blackberry bushes everywhere, and that kind of thing. So I grew up on this farm thinking it was like, this is the real wilderness. And then as I've gotten older, I've realized that's not so much the case. But I always kind of enjoyed being outside, but I never really developed a super like insatiable desire to be outside until I was a little bit older, more like in high school and college. And even now, I feel like every year it's growing deeper and deeper within me, which is cool because it's not something that like I had as a little child and then I'm trying to regain that. It's like I kind of have eased into it. I was a very artsy kid, super creative, loved to make stuff, anything. And so I'd venture outside into the yard and, do some outdoorsy things, but I wasn't like always outside. But I was always drawing and painting and cutting up little books to turn them into my own little books and, doing all sorts of fun things.
I love that art has been with you from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. It has, yeah. It's been one of the most kind of known things about myself throughout my life. As I've changed in so many ways, I feel like that has always been kind of a grounding love in my life.
The constant.
Yes.
Yeah. And at the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference, you told a story, and I'm really captivated by this story because you talked about how having migraines sort of led you towards nature. And I wonder if you can tell that story.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it plays a huge role in why I have structured my life and even my job so that I can spend so much time outside, because I started getting chronic migraines when I was 11, and that's been another constant in my life that I just cannot seem to get rid of them, no matter how many neurologists I see and strong medicines I'm on. But one of the very few sources of relief for me is spending time outside. And it might not totally take my migraine away if I have one on a certain day, but I'll definitely feel so much better when I'm outside. And so it's just like I have to go outside. And it's, yeah, in that kind of hardship of having chronic pain, I've definitely seen the gifts that it's given me, because when I was younger, I wanted to do something with art, but I wasn't really sure what it would be. I didn't really know what my place was in the art world, because there's so
Mm.
many things that you can depict. But as I started to spend more time outside and feel super, super grateful for the healing that I felt, then I was like, this is what I want to be creating. This is what I want to be sharing with the world. And it just keeps going back and forth, because the more I see interesting things, the more I want to paint them. And the more I paint, the more I'm like, ooh, it'd be fun to paint that thing too. And it just is a never ending, awesome cycle.
That's beautiful that you have that those things came together, that a doctor said, "Instead of going to bed, maybe go outside," and that has changed your career,
It
your
has.
life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
It's pretty wild to think about. And even today, I see it, now that I am a nature illustrator and I get to spend so much of my time outside or painting the things that I love. I still have a lot of like perfectionist tendencies, or
Yeah.
like borderline workaholic tendencies. Like I just love feeling productive. And
Mhm.
I think that another kind of hidden gift of having migraines is that if I overwork myself, then I will get a
Yes.
migraine. So I have to be so careful. I have to
Yes.
really take breaks. Like if I'm doing computer work, like editing an online class or something like that, I have to step away from the screen every 20 minutes or so, or else I'll be in a lot of pain. And
Mm-mm.
I'm kind of thankful for that reminder,
Mm.
because it really does help me to have more balance. I think if I didn't have it, I would just be like always working on something and have a hard
Yeah.
time with boundaries.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I have a similar story, not migraines, but a health issue that was just incredibly helped by being outside, by
Oh,
maintaining
really?
calm, and I have the same thing, that I definitely have boundaries that are physical boundaries because of my health, but they're actually quite good for making a person, keeping you in check and
Yeah, I don't
keeping a
know.
healthy balance.
I know there are some people that can spend all day
Mm.
on a computer screen and it doesn't phase them at all. And I can't imagine what that would be like. And sometimes I wish that I could do that when I'm like really deep in some sort of project that involves the screen, because that's one of my major migraine triggers. But actually, when I think about it, pretty happy that I am able to like have an excuse to take so many
Yes.
breaks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by your part of the world and have always wanted to walk the Appalachian Trail, and
Ah.
um, I just think that environment is magical. I'd love to hear some more about just West Virginia and the ecosystems that you find when you go exploring.
Yeah. Well, it's a very lush area in the summertime and spring, and there are a lot of noxious weeds that
Mhm.
contribute to the look of a very like full lush forest. But when you don't think about that, it's beautiful. I mean, uh, yeah, just tons and tons of shades of green and lots of waterfalls and winding streams, and it's very hilly and
Mhm.
not really mountains in the way that you think of mountains in my area. It's more
Mhm.
like rolling mountains, but everything feels so cozy. And like I love that part of the world because, well, I grew up there, so it's what I know the best, but also I just feel so like safe. And I've heard people describe it as they feel like they're being hugged when they're in West Virginia by the
Mm.
mountains, and I definitely feel that. So yeah, it's just a lovely state. And I grew up in kind of part of the state that's a little bit more developed. It's still very rural, small towns, but it's not. there aren't as many public lands or forests or places that you can just go and camp
Hmm.
without buying a campsite and things like that. So that's another thing that I've been kind of reckoning with recently, is how I am grateful for my own like little slice of the world where I grew up and where I currently live close to.
Hmm.
But I do often think about like the other areas in the Appalachian region that are, I just have more parks and more protected land. A lot of the beautiful forests in West Virginia are public or private land. So
Okay.
unless you have connections with friends or your family owns property, it's hard to just go out and feel like
Mhm.
you're really alone or, um, in the solitude of nature.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it, when you know a little bit about ecology and weeds, that you see an environment differently. I have a friend who's a
Yes.
weed specialist, and she says it really sort of spoils the view because other people see a beautiful natural landscape, and she just sees all the weeds.
Yes, and oh my goodness, recently I'm working on a new project that's really been fun, and I've been spending a lot of time on the farm that I grew up on, trying to see it through fresh eyes and
Mm.
taking my big old camera and trying to get really nice photos to work from. And it's so funny because I've taken a ton of reference photos that I was planning to use for this upcoming project. And then as I researched more, I realized that all of these plants that I grew up loving, like my favorite flowers, are, noxious weeds. So that's been something that I've been thinking about because
Yeah.
as an artist, I'm really drawn to them still, even though I know that maybe they're like out competing the other plants that are there and causing some harm. But I
Oh,
also look at them from an aesthetic perspective and I'm like, wow, these are so lovely. And I just have so many warm memories of like
yes.
picking bouquets of them with my mom, and my mom talking about how much she loved these flowers. And I am assuming she doesn't know that,
Mm-mm.
they're from another continent.
Yeah, and a
So
personal connection with the plant. It's so significant, especially when you carry it from childhood. Yeah,
yeah.
that's it. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, so I've been for this upcoming project, been actually thinking about, can I incorporate
Mm, mm.
uh, that, just kind of like me working through those feelings and
Yeah.
maybe even still depict those flowers that I grew up loving and talk about where they're actually from and,
Mm-mm.
their role in the environment in West Virginia now, but
Yes.
also like show some appreciation still because
Yeah.
I still really like them.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's sort of inner conflict of loving something and knowing
Yeah.
it's not the best.
Yeah, and it's funny too. I was just thinking about like growing up, there were all of these sinkholes on the farm. So just
Mhm.
like these massive, maybe 10-foot across holes in the ground. And I loved them when I was little because I thought they were forts. Like I would go in and, you know, have this like dream world in there in the hole. And I thought it was just so cool. And I thought it was totally just a natural part of the landscape. And then I learned that it was from mining practices
Oh.
from like decades before that had caused the land to just like sink.
Oh,
So it's
wow.
really not something you want, but I loved it.
Yeah, magical in childhood.
Yes.
I love those memories. Oh, what okay, so I've been listening to your, previous podcasts and other things, and one thing you said, and you just said it in passing, but it just captured my, attention. You talked about a plop spot.
Oh yeah.
Can you tell me what a plop spot is?
Yes. Oh, I love plop spots. I just plopped today for a while. So I have six brothers and sisters, and I'm in the middle. And uh, it's a lot of us were homeschooled at the same time, so it was extremely chaotic a lot of the time. And I'm very introverted, and I love silence. And my younger sister, Clara, that I'm really close to, she also had those same tendencies, even though she was one of the major culprits when it came to creating the chaos. But she actually had this other side where she liked to, retreat and have her quiet time too. So we just kind of, I don't know who came up with it, but one of us came up with it. And we would often talk about going and plopping in the woods, which just meant that we needed alone time in the woods. And I think it was probably high school or maybe middle school that we developed this kind of vocabulary word. And I've carried it with me since
I
then, and so
love
is
it.
she. She loves to write as her creative outlet. She
Mhm.
likes to write when she's outside too. And so she still goes and plops all the time with her notebook, and I go and plop with my camera or my sketchbook, and
I
it's just,
love it.
yeah, it's
So
been
beautiful.
fun.
So I'm so interested about that because you said that you've got all these siblings, and I also heard you talk about how you were homeschooled and that you and most of your siblings are now self-employed creatives. And I wonder if you attribute that to being homeschooled or if it was just like the culture within your family. What what
Hmm.
do you attribute that to? It's so
Well,
interesting.
yeah, I think it's a bit of both. My dad is an artist as well. He was an art professor for 20 years at a college near me, or near where we lived. And so he was always making stuff, and he had a very kind of unconventional way of making things. He's retired now. That's why I speak of him in the past tense. He's still alive. he just he is not an art professor anymore, but he would just kind of make things that he wanted to make, which I
Mhm.
always really admired. He was never big into like trying to get his stuff into galleries. He just liked to make stuff. And I think that was really cool to watch growing up for all of us, that you could just make something and put it in your own home for you to enjoy.
Mhm.
Doesn't have to win awards or be like a very public thing. And he would often make things out of found materials on the farm, so sculptural things like out of roots that washed up in a flood, or he would find junk that also washed up in the flood and weld it together and make little creatures out of them. So he was always making stuff. And my mom is also very creative in her way. She doesn't really do art, but she's just super resourceful. And
Mhm.
so I think it was just part of our family culture. Also, like music, my family, we had a band when we were little.
Nice.
So, actually, for a lot of years, till I was 14, we had a bluegrass family band.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What was your instrument?
I I was the artist, so I was a little bit lazy with music. So I played a lot of different things, but none of them well. I basically try one for like a year and I wouldn't be progressing fast enough. And so I'd be like, oh, that's not for me. I'll try this one. So over the years, I played the upright bass, the mandolin, tambourine. And then after all of that, I was just like, you know what? I am going to sing because that
Nice.
doesn't take a lot of practice. So I became the main singer.
That is so fun. So
Yeah.
there was just this culture of creativity all around you, and so
Yeah.
becoming making your own way in the world, making your own job seemed like a natural progression.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. And I think also having a lot of older siblings that are really excited to come up with their own way through life was
Mhm.
definitely inspiring for me. And I
Mm.
saw like my older brother, he started his furniture business when he was like 13. And I saw that when I was really little and thought that was so cool. And that he was like in the big time because he had a booth at the local county fair. And so then I wanted to have a booth at the county fair for my
Yes,
stuff. And I ended up doing that. So it's
nice.
just kind of like a very encouraging, creative atmosphere.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. And so then you went off to college and did graphic design,
Yes.
and now making your own way as an illustrator. How did you make that sort of switch or that progression?
Yeah. Well, I never wanted to be a graphic designer, but the school that I went to didn't have an illustration program, but my dad was a professor there, so I had really discounted tuition. And so I really wanted to go there and take advantage of that because I figured
Mm.
if I'm going to be an artist, I don't want to be super in debt. And
Yes.
so that I just kind of I didn't really explore too many other options for college. I was just like, oh, there's this free option. And I know that even if I'm in graphic design classes, I'm always going to be taking as many illustration classes as I can. And even if I can't major in it. And I'm also going to be creating on my own, so hopefully it'll be all right. And in the back of my mind, I always wanted to do basically what I'm doing now, having my
Mm.
own business and getting to create fun things and sell them, and um, just kind of getting to decide what to do and then go do it.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
I never really was sure if I could do it. I didn't have a lot of models of that
mhm,
shown to me. So in illustration specifically, like I knew I could probably have my own graphic design business or something that seemed really useful, but I wasn't sure that illustration was useful to the world. And so I kept that in the back of my mind as a dream that I wanted to make happen, but it took me a little while to have the confidence to go for it. And it took me all the way through college, graduating with a graphic design degree, and then working for a couple years as a graphic designer, and all the while doing illustration the whole time, whenever I could, and trying to just come up with my own projects. Even though I didn't have really real illustration clients, I would like come up with projects for myself. Like this month, I'm going to illustrate all the mushrooms that I see, or I'm going to illustrate all the tiny creatures that are endangered in my state, and things like that that weren't for anything. I just knew that I needed to continue to develop my skills, and also that I needed to have a cohesive portfolio if I wanted to have those clients in the future. So I needed something other than like logos that I did for my graphic design work to attract the people that I wanted to work with.
You've done some artist residencies, which are so fascinating and so fascinating to people who hear about them, in a national park and in other places, and I wonder if you could talk about that and how they developed you as an artist.
Yeah, they have been extremely influential for my kind of trajectory as an artist, because as I was developing this deeper and deeper interest in the natural world and spending a lot of time outside, and my work started to gravitate in that realm, I wasn't really sure like if I could have a role, like if my art could serve a purpose or it would be purely decorative. And I think
Mhm,
being a part of those residencies connected me with different opportunities where my art could go in different educational materials for the park or wildlife refuge, or I could teach a workshop there that could impact visitors in a way that combined art with nature observation. And I kind of just saw that I did have a kind of purpose that could be found in this intersection between nature and
mhm.
art. And it was just very validating. And I think through that too, I just met so many really interesting people that were not artists. And having gone to school for graphic design, I was surrounded by art kids. And then all of a sudden, I was surrounded by sciencey nature kids. And
Mm-mm.
kind of realized that I could connect with them just as much as I could connect with the art kids. And it really just felt very enriching to my personal life, too, to have this wide variety of friends that had all of these really different interests. So, the artist residencies for sure have been very impactful for me and have given me the opportunity to really just spend prolonged time outside hiking every day. That's kind of where I realized for the first time I was doing an artist residency in the Smoky Mountains and got to hike every day for a month. Every morning I'd go for like a 4-hour hike, and I realized that I felt so much healthier when I had
Yes.
that daily outdoor time. And so that was a light bulb moment for me, because before I knew that it was helping, but I never had the opportunity because I was working a full-time job in an office. I had never had the opportunity to do that. And so when I finished that first residency, that's when I decided to try out just having my own business and trying to do it full time and see what would happen, and also to definitely structure my days around outdoor time.
Yeah, and since then, you've had some amazing, connections. You've worked with the Smithsonian, the US Fish and Wildlife Service. You've done some amazing projects.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of those things kind of started as like an artist residency connection, or the Smithsonian connection started as an internship when I was, I think, a year and a half out of college. And it was a internship about American ginseng in the Appalachian Mountain region and the people that are working to conserve it. And so basically, there weren't a lot of written documents about the people who are still either trading ginseng for medicinal purposes or trying to conserve it in the Smithsonian's, archives. And so they were trying to get more information on it. And I've just kind of wiggled my way into a lot of different fun situations. Like, for example, with that, I saw that job description and they were not looking for an illustrator. They were looking for a researcher. And they also wanted someone that was in school, and I had already graduated. And I didn't even have a degree that they were looking for. So I just thought it seemed so interesting. And I thought they're trying to kind of spread awareness about this part of Appalachian culture. And visuals are often lacking when there are a bunch of researchers and they're trying to communicate what they find, even if it's so interesting. They need something visually to communicate it. And so I kind of pitched myself to them, to the email address that was at the bottom of the job listing, and said, I'm an illustrator and I'd love to do this.
Oh, wow.
And really, I was not thinking that they would go for it, but they went for it. And that turned into work for the next couple years. I've worked with them in a freelance capacity on different projects. And that was just because I put myself out there and kind of made a case for the need for artists.
I love that. And what you produced was absolutely beautiful. There's some examples on your website of the short little videos, but they have the audio there and telling a story. And it's really powerful and effective.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I actually got to collaborate with my sister Clara too. So that was another thing that we kind of wiggled in there. We applied together. So I made the pitch, and then I said, if you're interested, my sister is also interested in, environmental communications, journalism paired with environmental matters. And yeah, so we both got to be interns.
Yeah, how fun to do that together. And I love that story of, being a freelancer, it's not always easy going. You have to reach out, you have to put yourself out there, you have to be constantly searching and generating your own opportunities. And
Absolutely. Yeah, and just really trying to approach what you do with as much creativity as you're putting into your art. You just have to really think about, what can I offer the world, and then look for things that seem interesting to you and follow your curiosity, and be willing to maybe work for not very much the first time. Like, an internship opportunity doesn't really pay much, but the next time it could turn into something that helps be a part of your job.
there's this saying that if you find what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And
Yeah.
that's a lovely idea, but there is a lot of grinding in any job, isn't there?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I often, as I'm working on a painting, I'll be painting something super cool, and I'll have
Yeah.
moments where I'm like, I have been doing this for 5 days. I've been staring at this
Yeah.
little female cardinal since last week, and I'm ready for this to be over. And then I'll have another moment of reflection where I'm like, I get to paint a
Yeah.
cardinal for my job. That's really cool. And I'm really
Yeah.
grateful for that. But often it just does feels like work. It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, there's different sides. I think it's good for people to know, I think, that that there are taxes and, computer time and all that stuff,
Oh
as well
yeah.
as beautiful moments and joyful moments of connecting with nature, but
Yes, it's definitely a wonderful profession, but takes a lot of work too.
I'd love to hear about your process that you go through for creating. So, I heard you say that when you're making an illustrated map, taking a hike and being on the ground with the landscape is really important. I love to hear about your process.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like to make really detailed illustrated maps. I only make a couple a year because they take so long, and I end up not liking the process if I do too many of them. So,
Mhm.
but for that, it's definitely a lot of hikes, a lot of taking reference photos of all the iconic like rocks that I see, or, animals that I spot, overlooks, all those things, flora and fauna. And then I like bring everything back, and I often will start with a big sketch on kind of scrap paper. And for those maps, because I'm combining so many different little vignettes,
Hmm.
I will sketch everything out ahead of time on the big sheet of scrap paper. And I actually, the past like two that I've done, I've experimented with importing my reference photos into the Procreate app on my iPad, and
Mm.
just like kind of resizing them and cutting out the reference photos and positioning them. And that has been a huge time saver, and it's helped me to just kind of be able to balance like colors and everything a little bit better before I start painting, because making those maps can be a bit stressful, because there's no, like, it takes me about a month to do each one, and if I mess up
Yes.
towards the end, then
Yes.
it's done.
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
so that's the process for maps. And then after I have it all mocked up and I know where everything's going to go, then I go in and I'll first uh, get a big, or print off a big copy of the actual like trail map,
Hmm.
and I'll figure out what I want to include from that big map, because I can't include like every stream and everything. It would be way too busy. So I just transfer over. I just set it right next to my big sheet of watercolor paper. I work on really, really big sheets of paper, so like 24 by 30 inches normally.
Wow.
And I use a pencil and sketch really lightly, and then I just start to add in the vignettes, and then normally pen and ink next, and then watercolor last for that
Hmm. Hmm.
process. Yeah. And then
Wow.
for my other work, like, a lot of my work comes from, I'll give you the example of a series that I did this past year. It's called the Western PA Watershed Series, and it was a collaboration with a brewery near my town, near where I lived. And for the series, I illustrated 13 different labels that depict a different plant or animal from the watershed ecosystem. And that was so much fun, because I got to
Yeah.
come up with every subject that I wanted to depict and then illustrate it, and then it would end up on a beer can. And I love craft beer, so it was great. But for that, I did a lot of taking my own reference photos. Like, I went to the Pittsburgh Botanical Garden to look for different plants that I could incorporate into each one. And then for some of the subjects, they were like endangered species. So I reached out to people that have worked with those species. Like the blue crayfish that I depicted is hard to find. And that researcher gave me a few different photos that I could work with to make sure it was accurate, because I could never find that on my own. Well, I could, but it would take a long time. And yeah, and so then if I don't have a reference photo and I don't have anybody that I know of to supply me with their own reference photo, I'll often look at YouTube videos or documentaries that talk about that species, and then try to capture sketches. So it's kind
Mm.
of like nature journaling
Yes.
with my sketchbook, and I'll just watch it, and it's so much fun, because you really do get an incredible up close look at a lot of these hard to find animals. And yeah, and then I just create my own composition based on what I see from that, and then always send it to someone to review before
Hmm.
I put it out into the world. So this partnership with the brewery was great, because we also were working with a watershed conservation organization. So they got
Mm.
to hear about what I was thinking of putting on there, give me their ideas for what I should include, and look at everything. That was really great.
That's a wonderful way to reach people, because they're probably not talking about endangered species while they're drinking beer, but now they will be.
Yeah, yeah. And I've had so many people see those beer cans and become interested in my classes or my
Yeah.
book, or just different ways that I like to share about nature observation and
Mhm.
education, because they were interested in seeing that pretty unique label with the
Yeah.
weird little mud puppy salamander or something on it. Just something out of the ordinary. And it's been a really fun project.
Yeah. So another big arm of your work has been teaching classes, and you do this primarily on Skillshare as a top teacher, and your classes are amazing. I love
Thank
them.
you.
So good. And your style, I really like your style because it's realistic, but it's also got this sort of whimsical feeling, and it's like there's a bit of magic in there, and that really comes through in your classes.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yeah, I started teaching on Skillshare in 2020, and I basically started teaching there because I had an idea for a book, but I didn't have a publisher, didn't know how to make that happen. And so I decided to make a class that covered some of that material. And my first class was called Watercolor in the Woods, and it was just kind of watercolor foundations. And also, just I really wanted to inspire a lot of different people that might not have ever painted anything from nature to think about their surroundings as a potential art piece, because that's really changed the way that I view my surroundings. When I think of everything that I see outdoors as a potential painting, it's just like it's hard not to find things interesting, because if you look at something long enough, you're probably going to find something beautiful or interesting about it. So that class was really successful and really cool because I worked at it on it for like 3 or 4 months, and then
Mhm.
I just happened to finish it right after the pandemic began, and all these people were looking for something to do during lockdown.
Yes,
And
yes.
so it reached a lot of people and really helped like me mentally get through that year. It was a big
Yeah.
part of just feeling like, okay, like I'm still doing things even though a lot of my client work was taken away all of the sudden. I still had that kind of exciting thing happening. So that was really cool. And since then, I've done classes on urban nature journaling and watercolor landscapes from life. And then I just put one out a few weeks ago on combining watercolor and gouache together to make a mixed media nature painting. So they're all nature focused classes, and uh, they're they're a lot of work. My sister and I also collaborate on those. She's a filmmaker, and oh, they take so much time. But the
Yes.
nice thing is that people all over the world can enjoy them, and I don't always have to be teaching in person because
Yeah.
I'm an introvert. So that would be very draining.
Yeah. Well, they're beautiful, like, they're actually
Thank you.
visually stunning to watch, but on top of that, there's you and the instruction, but one thing that I really love about them is that there's a lot of you in them,
Yeah.
meaning, like, you are very authentic and warm, and you're not afraid to, show your vulnerability, I feel, and that really comes through as very, very authentic.
Oh, I'm very happy to hear that. Yeah, I never want people to be intimidated by what I do. And I have been drawing and painting since I was really little. And so I've been perfecting these skills for a long, long time. And it's still really hard. So I try to show moments where I like make a mistake and have to restart. I did that
Yes.
in one of my classes. I had to start completely over in the middle of it. And so I showed that painting
I
that
love
didn't
that.
turn out. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think people really do resonate with that, because it's like it's a never ending journey, and it's great even though it can be really frustrating. And I think I also want to kind of dispel that myth that painting is always, or creating art, sketching is
Yeah.
always just so relaxing and peaceful, and you
Yes.
just like love every second, because it's really it's a mix of both kinds
Yeah.
of the good and the bad.
I love that at the end of, so you'll give an instruction, "This is what we're doing," but it's not just that. Then you sort of speak to the camera and it's like, "And, if you're feeling this, then this is what you can do." So, like, very much layered and very, very personable, very connected. I really think that that shines through in your classes.
Well, thank you so much.
I wonder, you've talked about being introverted, and I wonder if, um, you identify as someone who's highly sensitive?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes,
I can feel that through your work, but I just wanted to
yes.
not assume anything. But I wonder
Yeah.
about, because I have this highly sensitive trait as well, and I wonder how you feel high sensitivity sort of informs your work.
Oh, I think it plays a role in everything that I do, and it's both what helps me see things really closely and notice subtleties and notice the beauty in things that some people
Mm-hmm.
don't notice or see as beautiful. Um, but it's also
Yeah.
it's hard.
It's yeah.
It
It's an
really
interesting
it
Go on, go on.
really, it's hard, and it's part of the reason, again, that, like, I started teaching on Skillshare is because
Mm,
I started having a lot of people ask me to teach workshops in person, and I was just really overwhelmed by them a lot of the time. Like,
yeah.
I had a lot of fun. It was, again, like, great, but also really hard for me, and so I was trying to think of, like, how can I share
Mhm.
what I think is could be a really powerful message and skills with people in a way that's not as burdensome on me. And I think
Yes.
that's just something that I'm navigating every day. How can I share my work on social media because I have a business, and I also want to inspire people on social media, but also I feel like really overwhelmed by it a lot of the
Yes.
time, and just trying to navigate it is pretty difficult. But I have learned that, and I think I've kind of realized this in the past couple years, that a lot of people who are interested in nature journaling and even just hiking or being outside a lot tend to be highly sensitive, or at
Mhm,
least
mhm.
somewhat sensitive. And
Yes.
so when you're open about that, you just kind of are met with all of these other people that are like, yes,
Yeah.
me too. That's why I like your work. And it's been cool because even in the people that buy my art prints online and take my classes, I've like never had anyone rude purchase anything
Mhm.
from my Etsy shop, even
Mhm.
though I've, sold a lot of things and been late on a lot of things, and things have been damaged in the mail sometimes, but nobody has ever said anything rude. And I think that's amazing, and just a testament to the fact that
Yeah.
the people that tend to like my work are just like very aware of the fact that life is hard, and they don't want to make it hard on anyone else.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, as someone who has, hypersensitivity, that there's this trade-off, isn't there? There's this feeling like, yes, it opens you up to feeling a depth of feeling that I would never want to forego. And at the same time, you're sort of vulnerable to the world in a way that others aren't. And I'm really glad that it sounds like you're attracting people to you that have a sensitivity as well. It's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's just going to continue to grow as I am more comfortable with being this way, because I think for a long
Yes.
time I was like, oh, this is a flaw and I'm going to work really
Yes.
hard and I'm going to get over it. And I was pretty determined, like, I am going to be
Mhm.
that girl that goes on book tours and teaches tons of workshops because, like, I can make myself do it.
Mhm.
And I'm realizing I can't, and I don't want to, because I
Yeah.
can exist and be like healthy and have a good career and all of these things and embrace this part of me too.
I remember reading a book called The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron, and I don't know if you've read this book, but
I've read
it
definitely parts of it, and I think I've listened to a TED Talk by them.
yeah, I just remember going, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
Like you say, it's not a flaw. It's she talks about it being it can be your superpower if you understand it. Um,
Yeah.
but that moment, I remember reading that book and realizing, "Oh, it's not a defect."
Yes. Oh,
And
it's so
you can
amazing to
work with
learn.
it, and knowing that is so important.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's funny because I think it does help you, like, when I do teach something in person, I always have like candles if I can. I have nice soft
Yeah,
music,
nice.
and I love to like have the lighting be really nice and have something cozy that people can sip on so they feel at peace. And I try to communicate that in my online classes too, that feeling of like it's okay to just be like quiet here.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason I'm so drawn to making books too is that it's a way that people can get away from the screen, which I find to be really overwhelming. And I think a lot of
Mhm.
other people do too. Not just the screen, but also the internet.
Yes,
um,
yes.
all of it. But I just really like the idea that we can like craft things for others that have been healing for us. And
Yes.
I think that books are a really nice way to do that because you can just take it in your backpack and go somewhere quiet and you don't need anything else. You can just be alone there.
Yeah. So you've just published your new book, and I have it right here. It's
Yay!
so beautiful.
Thank you so
Watercolor in
much.
nature. Congratulations.
Thanks. It's 3 months old as of, oh, I think in a few days it'll be 3 months
Yeah.
old.
Oh, I love that you're counting that.
Yes, I
That's
I
really adorable.
am.
Well, and this is I know this was one of your sort of life ambitions, so it must have been amazing to feel that hold that first physical copy in your hand. What was that like?
Yeah. Oh, it felt so good. I got the copy in the mail and I had it in my backpack and then I had a meeting that I had to go to, so I couldn't look at it for like 3
Oh.
hours. And I think I maybe looked at it in the bathroom of the place where the meeting was because I like could not wait.
Oh, wow.
And I just was so relieved in looking through that there weren't any like problems with the printing, that
Mhm.
everything I didn't see any. I haven't found any typos yet. There probably are a couple, but I haven't found any yet. And so I was relieved. And then since then, it's just been nice. I feel like every 3 weeks or every month or so, I get it off the shelf and just flip through it
Yeah.
and remind myself that like no matter how many things I make that seem fleeting, like maybe it's something that goes on a t-shirt and people are going to wear the t-shirt for a little bit and then throw it away. But like I feel like a book is just a little bit more permanent and it
Yeah.
reminds me that like I can work slowly. That's something I've been learning too. I don't need to always be producing things. I can work slowly and take my time and create pieces that can last a long time.
Oh, yeah. I wonder if you could describe for the listener what they'll see when they open the pages of your book.
Yeah, well, you will see a fully illustrated book. I really didn't want to use any photos for the book other than the reference photos for the project. So everything is illustrated down to the supplies that you'll want to get started with watercolor, which I had a lot of fun with. My husband has a photo of me painting. I like have my nose down to my desk painting a paper towel in like extreme detail. Like I'm painting my paper towel on a piece of watercolor paper. And he just thought that was really
I
funny.
love that.
Yeah, so everything's illustrated, and you'll, in the beginning, you find some just like top tips for getting started with watercolor and the materials that you'll need, and uh, probably like 8 different techniques that I think are really critical for all the projects that you'll see again and again throughout. So I just do a brief introduction to watercolor. And then there are 10 projects that are watercolor and ink together, and 10 projects that are only watercolor. And the reason for that is I think that watercolor and ink together can be a somewhat quicker way to render your subject and also have a little bit more control while you're working. And then after you feel comfortable with that, you'll be ready to graduate to just watercolor. And yeah, that's pretty much it. At the end, I have a section about going beyond just painting from the book and about adding in your own creative backgrounds based on what that subject might eat or where it might live. So adding in little notes of its habitat and things like that. And then also getting started with nature journaling. So if people are interested in painting beyond just working from the reference photos, talk about that a little bit. And I really hope that it can be a segue for people into nature journaling and journaling or painting from their own photos that they take. So it's more of like a lifestyle instead of just like, oh, this is a hobby in this book
Yes.
that I do and then I put it away.
Yeah, I love that. It's like a bit of scaffolding to help them break into it, and then they can turn that into a daily habit or a lifelong habit that they can take with them.
Yes, yes.
How did you choose the subjects for the lessons? Did the subjects have a personal meaning for you? How did you choose
Yeah.
them?
So most of them did. Most of them are my own photos that I took, and I just I wanted to choose things that were a little bit unexpected. So not all just florals or butterflies, but a wide variety of subjects and some that some people might find attractive. Like I did include a couple flowers because I know some people, like my grandma, I don't know if I've told this story before, but she one point I was showing her my mushroom series, and she was like very confused. And she said, I just wish that you'd paint more butterflies. And so I know that there are people that, like, if they see a book filled with just like mushrooms and snails and moss, they're not going to pick it up. So I wanted to have a few things that everyone will like, mass appeal, and then a few things that are a little bit more strange, like the milkweed pod with the caterpillar on it. So I wanted to have a nice array of things. And I also wanted to choose things that were simple enough that people would have a high likelihood of achieving something that they like, and so
Yes.
that they'd be motivated to keep doing it, which was a little difficult for me because I wanted to create things that were like really, really detailed, and I had to kind
Mm-hmm.
of rein it in a little bit
Mm-mm.
and make sure that it was
Accessible.
getting, yes, accessible and slowly more difficult throughout the book and all of those
Mm-mm.
things.
I just saw you had an Instagram story about the moth that formed for one of the projects in the book, and it's delightful to see the original photo of you with this moth, and then how that transformed into this
Yes.
whole new life.
I know, yeah. I can remember that encounter so vividly because I was working in this little art gallery. I was the artist in residence at an art gallery in West Virginia, in this little mountain town that I love. And a friend came walking by the sidewalk, and she yelled in, Rosalie, come out here. You're going to love this. And there was this imperial moth resting on the sign of the art shop that I was working in. And I did love it. I had never seen one before, and it made me so happy. So I got some photos, never anticipated that I'd use them for a book. I thought maybe I would do a painting of it, but I just kind of held on to it. And then a couple years later, it became the reference photo for a project in my book, which is now sold at that art shop. So,
Nice. I love
yeah.
that cycle, and also it must be so fun to see people's project as they start to come out
Yeah.
after buying the book and seeing them posted. That must be really
Oh, it's
enjoyable.
amazing. I love seeing people's projects, and knowing it's like my little secret that I have these backstories for all of the
Yeah.
projects, like the mushrooms in the book. I went on a camping trip with my friends, and I woke up. I think we put our tents up after dark or something. Like, I didn't know that there was this giant mushroom right next to my, like, I was sleeping right next to it the whole night, and I didn't even know. And then I opened the tent door the next morning, and it was just like right in my face, and it was like 8 inches tall. It was huge.
Oh, wow.
And I took a picture of it, and then now
Mhm.
people all over the world are painting.
Yes, it's amazing. I
Yeah.
love that. I'm so interested in your sort of personal development as an artist, and I've heard you speak about these sort of restrictions that you put on yourself. So you stopped using ink pen to sort of stop relying on it, and then at one stage you stopped. You just gave yourself gouache to use to in order to progress in that. I'd love to hear about that, about your um, these ways of sort of guiding yourself to in your artistic development.
Yeah. Well, I think I tend to be a pretty structured person in general, so I don't think
Mhm.
that's for everyone, but I I have found that I really like making work that's consistent.
Okay.
I think I just really like things to match. Um, And so I really like to create series where everything looks like similar color palette and everything. And it's really easy for me to just keep going with that for a really long time and not switch anything up. And so I think introducing some limitations has really helped me to grow my style, because otherwise I would never evolve as an artist. And so for a while I decided no more ink because I want to get better at watercolor, and I wasn't good at watercolor. Just a few years ago I really had a hard time controlling it, and often all of my colors would blend together, but not in like an attractive way, in a very chaotic way. And so I was mostly just working with pen and ink, and then I'd go over everything with watercolor. And I thought I was doing watercolor, but really it was just like a side note at the end. And so I decided to try to not use water or not try to not use ink for
Mhm.
about a year. And during
Wow.
that time, that's when I started doing all the series of the mushrooms and the tiny worlds of West Virginia and all of those things. And I really developed those skills a lot more. And then after that, I incorporated the ink back in and saw that like it could give me two different styles when I wanted to use them, but I didn't need to always be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And then gouache was a similar thing. I did an artist residency this past spring in Nevada at a wildlife refuge, and I decided to focus on gouache the whole time. And I'd experimented a little bit with it in college and a little bit in high school, but I never painted the natural world using gouache. And so I was very scared actually because it's so bold and I just felt like
Yeah.
it wouldn't capture the subtleties that I really love about the natural world and then I try to capture with watercolor. But it's been really fun over the past year to see now looking back at my work a couple years ago, it looks so bland because
Okay.
I was just I didn't have that full range of colors. I wasn't using a full range of colors. I stayed away from colors like pinks and purples because I was like, oh, they're gonna look too like tacky. And now I'm just trying to embrace all of the colors,
Yes.
and it's way more fun, I think.
And it's beautiful how you can now weave in watercolor, use the traits of watercolor that you love and the traits of gouache that you love in one painting together.
Yes, yeah, I can just really make a lot more fun decisions throughout the process instead of knowing exactly like, oh, I'm using this, this is how it's going to turn out. There's more of a mystery. And I
Mhm.
think I needed that to continue to feel excited about painting.
One thing that I really love that you do, you mentioned it just before, was the tiny worlds and, like, looking at textures and looking really closely at one thing and getting captivated by the shapes and the colors of one small area of nature. I think that's a beautiful way of looking at the world.
Yeah, and it's really transformed the way that I walk through the world because
Mhm.
I really have a hard time getting bored now when I have the opportunity to go outside because I just anything that I look at could be not only fun to look at, but it could also be a painting
Yeah.
and everything. I feel like I was just on a walk today and I was thinking about it. I feel like now every day feels like a treasure hunt. Like
Yeah.
anytime I go outside, I really don't know what's going to happen. And it feels so exciting just to like be alive and be able to experience that. And I didn't know that for a really long time. I didn't have that awareness that there was so much happening. So I feel very grateful to have just kind of discovered that in the past maybe 5 years or so.
And that's beautiful, and that absolutely comes through in your work as the thing that you inspire in others, that you can help them by saying, wow, like, look at this. Look at this tiny piece of moss on this stone.
Mm-hmm.
Just by getting excited about something and sharing that with someone else with your heart and with your enthusiasm is a way of sort of transferring that skill, that ability to be curious and open and amazed at the world to other people.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. And I think that another aspect of my story is that I was never a very good science student. I like wasn't super interested. I even through college I just kind of went through the different classes that I had to do, but I wasn't super engaged. But so the way that I approach things like nature journaling and nature illustration is from a very artistic perspective. And I think
Mhm.
that's helpful for some people to hear because
Yes.
sometimes we can look at other people's work and see tons of data about something
Mhm.
that's like scribbled in and it feels like that person innately knows all of those things. And I think number one, a lot of people that are nature journaling are researching after they see or
Mhm.
as they
Yes.
see that their curiosity is piqued and they go home and they look it up and then they add it back in. So that's one thing that I've learned. And then the other thing is that you can really just notice what draws you to nature and then really lean into that and
Mm.
try new things, try to dabble in a little bit of different techniques that you might be inspired by. But if you're not the type to like be obsessed with tons of fun facts, then you don't have to push it. You can just love the way that the natural world looks and want to protect it as much as you can because of that. So whatever feels true to you.
Yeah, that's really good. That's a really good message. I wonder how you're going to go forward because you're very young. You've already taught tens of thousands of students on Skillshare. You've published a book. You've worked with the Smithsonian. How are you going to keep going?
I don't know. I forget sometimes that I am so young. I feel like I'm not. I think it's from having siblings that are older. I've always just
Yeah.
like thought that I was older than I am.
Hmm.
um, well, the next project that I'm working on, I won't give you all the details, but it's another book, and it's not an instructional book. It's a book that's filled with my illustrations, and it involves me finding things in the forest and learning about them and sharing what I'm learning with others.
How
And
cool.
yeah, so that'll come out in 2024. And um, I think I could talk about it. Nobody's told me not to talk about it, so I'm just going to talk about it. But my husband and I are leaving next month on a 6-month trip for this book project. So
Wow.
we're going to be traveling up the entire Appalachian Mountain Range from North Carolina to Newfoundland in Canada, because the mountains go way up into Canada too, which a lot of people don't know. So we're packing up our apartment next month and setting out. So that's all. That trip will become the foundation of
Wow.
my book.
That's incredible. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness. That's going to be an amazing adventure. And
I
then
know.
with the book at the end, that's so cool.
Yes, and I think it'll be just interesting because I've had different artist residency experiences, and they've all been about 2 weeks to 1 month, and I love every single one of those opportunities. But I've always felt like I could go deeper in, like,
Mhm.
with just that amount of open time to hike and create. And so I'm curious to know if 6 months is too much, or like, can I keep going for 6 months?
Yes.
Or if it feels really good. So
I'm
we'll
so
see.
excited for you. That sounds like an amazing project. I can't wait to see
Thank
what
you.
comes of it.
Thanks. And right now I'm trying to also determine, like, so I have this opportunity to fill a whole book with my own illustrations, and
Yeah.
how should I best, I told you I really like um, things to match. So I'm trying to
Mhm.
figure out how I can blend together different mediums to keep things fresh.
Yes.
And so that's a challenge I'm working through right now. I've been coming up with like example illustrations to kind of determine how do I do this.
So exciting. Rosalie, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me on the
Well,
podcast
thank you
today.
so much. I love your podcast, like I said, and I have like 10 episodes downloaded on my phone, ready to go for my next road trip. And I listened to
That
one
is
this
so cool.
morning.
Oh, thank you so much again. It's been a real joy to chat with you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Rosalie. For me, one thing that shines through in all Rosalie's work is just a genuine authenticity and kindness. I think she brings a lot of herself to her work, and certainly she did during this conversation too. I really appreciated that. I love the way Rosalie aims to show the intricacies of nature by encouraging people to look closely at the patterns and textures and colours around them, with the hope that this will foster love and care for the natural world. We really need more of this. We need more love for the earth, and we need love for each other. Sometimes I get kind of emotional here on my wrap-ups, especially when we go through weeks like we've just had this week. I'm sending love to the people of Ukraine and people affected by the floods here in Brisbane, and anyone else who needs some extra love right now. Take care of our earth and take care of each other. Thanks so much for listening. See you next week.